I'd like to call this meeting of Lancaster County Council to order. I would like to welcome everyone here tonight. This is our first regular meeting of the year. And as you can see up here to my left, we have a new council member, Mr. Jose Luis, representing District 4. We welcome you here and look forward to the next 2 years. For us, anyway, you got 4. And Mr. Marstall, would you introduce our lawyer?
I absolutely will. It's my pleasure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One, I want to first say the county has been well served over at least the past 4 years through our outside counsel, John DeBose. So certainly want to acknowledge John DeBose and the legal work that he's done with us as a county and being on our outside retainer, assisting our departments, our boards and commissions, and certainly counsel and the policy development. And so it's been great having John as my first year here. I thank him for his sage advice and guidance. But as we continue to grow and think ahead in the future of the county, we've determined with council support to bring in-house counsel. So we now have counsel available to staff with regular hours full-time within the building, and so I'm pleased to introduce next to me is Jenny Merck-DuPont. She comes to us from Spartanburg County, where she served 14 years as either the deputy or the county attorney for Spartanburg County, and she also has a background as in the solicitor's office as a judge, and so she brings a wealth of experience for us to help guide us on our policy formulation to make sure that we're within the guidelines, and will be a great asset to me as well as council and the entire organization. So please join me in welcoming Jenny and thanking John.
And now would y'all please rise and join Council Member Jose Luis as he leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear Lord, thank you for having us gathered here today to work on behalf of the citizens of Lancaster County. Give us the wisdom to lead well and to listen and lead with our hearts. Thank you for all the blessings that we have and the privilege that we have to be here today. Amen.
Amen. Let's move on down to our approval of our agenda. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Motion from Ms. McGriff, a second from Mr. Blackman. Any discussion? Hearing none, we're ready to vote. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval of our agenda this evening. And we do understand there's a ball game at 7:30. Some people may want to go watch, so it should be a short meeting. First of all, we have a couple of special presentations. First of all, a recognition of our Employee of the Quarter for 2022, third quarter, presented by Mr. Dennis Marstall, our County Administrator. Mr. Marstall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Council. As you know, it's always a good, exciting time to highlight the work of county employees. Certainly, I think the fact that our product, in my mind, is customer service, I think is what we want to be known for as we do our different service delivery and adopt and implement different things to help citizens get about their business as they interact with us. And every quarter we take nominations across the employee workforce. We have about 1,100 employees, including some part-time employees and seasonal. And so we got a great pool to draw from when it comes time for nominations. And this quarter's nominee and selected employee got 2 nominations, and both of them happen to highlight that this employee goes well above and beyond what is asked of them. And one of them goes on to highlight that this employee always has a smile on his face, is always asking if he can help us in any way, and he would do anything in the world for you and never ask anything in return. So I think that's high praise. And I also want to highlight that another nominee or nomination for the states that he has the biggest heart and deserves the world. And so I think they also want to say he's a selfless worker and will always help you when asked. And that's clearly the type of employee that we're looking for and want to highlight in Lancaster County. So I would like to ask them to join me at the podium from our Parks and Recreation Department, Mr. Cliff West, our Employee of the Quarter.
yeah, of course. Cliff, I saw you this morning, and I think you said there was going to be a presentation on our new park. Do you want to go on and give it to us when you get through with this? Yeah, bring the family up.
Yeah, introduce your family for us, Cliff.
Yeah.
First is my mom,
Aw.
Wes, and my wife, Melissa. We call her Missy.
I was fixing to say, who's Melissa?
This is my daughter, Chastity, and my oldest grandson, Bryce, and my youngest, Brooks, and my son-in-law, Jared Bailey. She's crazy. This is my niece, but I treat her like my daughter.
Yeah. Mr. Mosteller, go ahead.
Cliff, I just want to tell you, this family is my constituents, and I'm proud of them. They're great people, and is really excited you're getting this reward. I've known you for years, and everything you do, you give 110%. You always have, and we're really glad to have you as a county employee. Thank you.
Thank you. I enjoy my job.
Thank you. I know you do.
Thank you.
And we thank you again, Cliff. Now we have a recognition by Keep Lancaster County Beautiful Committee, Ms. Mandy Cato.
Well, hello
Cliff,
again.
you're welcome to stay, but you know, you can leave whenever you want to. Go ahead.
All right, it's good to see everybody again. And with Keep Lancaster County Beautiful, as you all know, the backbone of our success is through our volunteers. But tonight we want to give a nod to one of the county leaders who has inspired our volunteers many times. And I'm talking about you, Billy. Got you something down here. Billy has never missed a cleanup that we have done. And I mean, he gets out there, he is in the ditches for 3 solid hours. I go by and there's just orange bag after orange bag, or green, whatever the color is that we use that day. So I just wanted to thank him. And I have a few, will my board stand up, whoever's here? Got Claire and Tony. And they wanted also to come to recognize Billy. So, yeah, we appreciate you, Billy. Thank you. Thank you.
Each.
Yes.
Yeah, I would encourage anybody to come out and when it's time to pick up trash, maybe announces it. It's rewarding to go out and clean up the road. Look, how the road looks, and when you get through, you look back and see the road clean. It's really rewarding to the ones that do it, where everybody knows how it is. I encourage anybody to make announce that. I think now several years, everybody go out.
Thank you, Mr. Mosteller. All right, let's move on down to our citizens' comments. Please bear in mind, this is not a period of dialogue with council or a question and answer period. This is your opportunity to address council with your concerns. I ask that you address your remarks to council as a body and not to any individual council member. Please speak into the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and you will have up to 3 minutes to address council. Your time will not start until you have provided your name and address. First, we have Emily Brown.
Good evening. My name is Emily Brown, 926 Oakland Avenue, Rock Hill, South Carolina, 29730. I represent Kings Mountain Self-Storage, who's applied to rezone 4263 Doby's Bridge Road from low-density residential to institutional. The purpose of this is to build a daycare and possibly some future complementary development like a medical office, dentist or doctor office. The Kings Mountain Self-Storage has spent a considerable amount of time and money, more so than probably most applicants, on their due diligence for this project. They have hired an environmental consultant who's provided them with a plan for decommissioning a landfill that's on the site. They have spoken with a consultant about the septic tank that's going to be required there. They've hired a traffic engineer to develop recommendations in conjunction with SCDOT to provide a plan for a safe entrance for this property, which is what council required at the last meeting. You wanted some more information, and they're here to provide that for you tonight. They also updated the site plan so that it shows the UDO compliant drop-off areas. This is right next door at Indian Land Elementary School. It's also zoned as institutional use, and what they're proposing is a complementary use. That's something that in this area, with the growth and all of the families moving in at daycare, will be very well received. The size of the building and the daycare is going to be determined by the needs of the community, and also they're going to be working with a third party they're actually going to build for, and that third party is a professional daycare service that will run the daycare. They're going to leave as much of the existing wooded areas and natural buffer as possible. They do not plan to disturb any of the wetlands on the rear of the property. This is a complementary use to the adjacent school, and they're asking that you approve first reading tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Kevin Brown?
Kevin Brown, 3111 Kramer Pond Drive, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28205. Happy New Year, Council. Welcome new members. I want to thank, first off, it wouldn't be fair without thanking planning staff for their help during this process. It's been a pleasure to work with them. It's not always a pleasure sometimes, but this one's been very fair and equitable. I just wanted to mention that we have done a lot of work since our last meeting, and we've done a lot of work throughout the process. We have, as Emily mentioned, brought on a traffic engineer. Their firm specializes in school systems, so their professional opinion, we think's really well regarded in this decision. Also want to point out that we are going to make improvements to the property beyond just the school. If you come by this property now, the line of sight is hampered by a lot of the vegetation and trees that are on the property. That will go away with this development, which we think will make the road a much safer place in the future. I really don't have any more to add other than our entire team's here. So if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them. Thank you again for your time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Brown. Ms. Donna Vukovic?
Hi, my name is Dana Vukovic, and I am 6717 Size Lane, Lancaster, South Carolina. We bought a house in the Walnut Creek development, and my home built our home, and I lived there for a year and a half now, and we have erosion up on the hill. They refused to come and fix it. They only fixed half of it. They don't answer our phone. They don't come. I had DHEC today, and they said that they can't do much about it. But my home was supposed to show up, and they didn't. Then they said they're coming at 4:30. They didn't show up again, and I just don't know if City Council can do something about it. The erosion is pretty deep, and I have mud in my yard on both sides. And the people above me, they're losing their property. They're back home. And they already have a small yard, and it's all eroding in my yard. And right now, it's really, even the dirt is going in a drain, city drains. And so I don't know who can help us, or before we, either do hire attorneys, which we can't afford it, or I don't know if you guys can do something about it.
Can I will you give our clerk to council your phone number, and I will have somebody somebody from the county will call you in a.
Thank you, I really,
in a-
really
in
appreciate it.
address.
All right, because they're not contacting us anymore, and we just don't know what to do anymore. And there is around 6 homes, and all of their gutters, the rain gutter is all draining straight in my yard, so.
Okay, well, give her your phone number, and they'll contact you.
Mr. Chairman, our stormwater staff was on site with her today.
Okay.
And so we've engaged on that, and we'll have a
Okay.
follow-up.
They were there, but they said there's nothing that they can do either, so, thank you.
Thank you, and I think that concludes our citizens' comments. Let's move down to our consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve consent agenda item 7A.
Second.
I have a motion from Mr. Mosteller, a second from Ms. McGriff. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval of our consent agenda. Let's move on down to 8A, Resolution 1225-R2023 regarding update the continuity of county government plan. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion from Mr. Carnes. Second from Ms. McGriff. Mr. Marstall, Mr. Player?
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to highlight on Exhibit A of that, we do have an update that the Indian Land High School address is not correct within the plan. Just to make sure we note that we have a version that does have the correct address for the Indian Land High School. And this is a perfunctory adoption by council. After we create the new council, then this plan is updated to reflect as well the succession with the county council for emergency management declarations. All of us take the recommendation from the emergency management director, Mr. Player, and then it spells out across the organization how that works with council and staff to do emergency declarations and how we address emergency incidents within the county.
Do we need to have a alternate motion to approve the resolution because it's not in its final form?
I think just noting it, that we have the correction to go in there is sufficient.
Do we have any points of discussion during this time?
Yeah, go ahead.
So as we're looking through this, the emergency management director is the one that's going to be in charge of declaring emergencies. Is that required per the code?
They make the recommendation, and then we go down with the staff, administrator, and county board chair. And so Mr. Player can give you a quick highlight of that. But no, the emergency management director, depending on the incident, makes a recommendation, and then we set into motion between the elected bodies and the administrative staff. So Mr. Player can outline that for you.
Those recommendations would come based on the fact that there had either been a governor's declared state of emergency that affected Lancaster County directly as part of the whole state of South Carolina or as a county by itself, or a presidential declaration that again would affect the entire state of South Carolina. They can do declarations that affect parts of the state as well. So it could be localized to Lancaster County or a group of counties. But those declarations are normally in place ahead of any recommendation that I, as the Director of Emergency Management for the county, would make. We could have a localized flooding event. We could have something that happened that affected just our own population. And in that case, I would contact the county administrator as long as he's available. If he's not available, then I go down this list. I don't make the declaration. That person, through your authority, does that. In South Carolina, the emergency management directors are not authorized by state statute to make declarations. We make recommendations to our governing bodies, and then we do what you all direct us to do. The last time that this came to play was when COVID was declared, and we spent almost 2 years under gubernatorial emergency declarations, 30 days at a time. Mr. Willis was here most of the time. Mr. Marstall came in after they had stopped doing the gubernatorial declarations. The presidential declaration on that still continues, but we're not we're not doing anything to that effect at this point. But early on, there were a number of things that we did do that I was able to do for the county based on those declarations, and Mr. Willis acting in his capacity along with the council that was seated at the time.
Does that also include, so this ordinance would establish the rules and the power to issue the rules and regulations in the event of that emergency to the director?
You're not doing an ordinance, you're doing a resolution, so it doesn't have the power of the ordinance, but your resolution basically adopts our plan as a guide.
While you're thinking of your next question, Councilman, since we got three attorneys present, when you look at the sites where they're citing the code section, South Carolina Code section, it says SC, ST, SEC. Well, ever since I've been practicing my jailhouse lawyering, I've never seen sites sort of written that way. It's generally South Carolina Code of Laws, whatever, 1-9-60.
South Carolina Emergency Management also comes under the Code of Regulations. It's not all state statute.
Then number two is, on page 1, South Carolina Code Section 1-9-60 seems to say our emergency director should appoint up to anywhere from 3 or 4 successors to 7 successors. So if you weren't here, there would be a line of authority who would then ask. And I don't think this document covers that.
It does.
It does? Okay.
Succession in it.
All right, and then page 6 says SC space ADC, Code of Laws. What does SC ADC mean? That's on page 6 of the document.
That's not the all disaster, I don't know what the C stands for.
All right, but I think it might need to be.
I think that's, my guess is that's state administrative code, like the code of regs versus the statutes.
I think it is. We reference the documents that come straight out of Columbia, meaning South Carolina Emergency Management. They give us the language that we use to do the plan. Then we customize it to our locations, our standard of leadership.
Well, I mean, again, I guess somebody ought to maybe explain what SCADC means instead of just putting the acronym out there. I mean, it ought to be in the document.
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a stickler about using acronyms and not knowing what they mean. I hate that, and I'm going to have to be honest, I missed that one.
There's another one, Darren, that I don't have in my notes here, but somewhere it talks about complying with 85-1. That's all it says. Now, later on, the next sentence talks about, or tries to talk about what 85-1 is. And 85-1, which I was skimming this because of over the weekend, but it appears to me that this 85-1 is a governor's maybe declaration. It's not really a statute and/or a reg, and that's fine. It's got the authority behind it, but we just need to have that defined in the document also, because it makes no sense to say it complies with 85-1, because that could mean a lot to a lot of different people, probably in different arenas. Page 6 talks about essential records. We got to keep them anyway. I'm not sure why that needs to be there. And then when we take that one step further, if you look at page 23 and 24, it goes into the Register of Deeds and all these other records that need to be kept in anyway. So I'm not sure why that's even referenced, because we're going to do all the things as a government that we need to do anyway. And I think probably page 23 and 27 could be removed. And my last comment is page 9, Roman numeral 5, A and B, seem to have different approval methods. And I'm not sure why that wouldn't be consistent, that A wouldn't be worded exactly like B would be worded.
I'm sorry, which page did you say?
That would be on page 9 of the document itself. Roman numeral 5, A and B.
I've got on page 9 the succession of authority for the county administrator. Is that not the same page?
It's page 3, I think, of the document
Okay.
that you're referring to. Yeah.
When we print, yeah. Okay, on page 3, what exactly was it now?
Roman numeral 5, A and B.
Disaster and emergency powers of director.
Should that not be worded exactly the same? It's accomplishing two different goals, but
Well, I think A flows right on into B. It could be combined, but what it enumerates is that I have authority to try to come up with those things, and then I have to take them to the county administrator before they're actually able to be empowered.
this is exactly what you wanted to say.
Yes, sir.
Okay, as long as you feel good.
That in essence is what we did during COVID. We came up with the things that needed to be done. I went to Steve and he approved those. Some of those I think he brought to you all, but most of those things he approved because they were administrative rather than, they weren't costing the county any money. ADC, I think, and I'm not going to hang my hat completely on it, I think it comes out of the Code of Regulations based on the way that's used, but I'll verify that for you.
Any more questions, discussion, comments?
So is this resolution, as we go through it in that same section 5A, so when it empowers the director to make and issue rules and regulations on matters reasonably related to the protection of life and property as affected by such disaster, what does that include?
It's all inclusive of any disaster that we might have that affects the population of the county.
But what rules and regulations?
It would be things that I would feel that would be necessary to be able to protect the population. I don't have the authority to implement. My authority is to come up with those and then present them to the county administrator, who would either approve it or decide that he needed higher approval, which would bring it to you all.
And some of that could be evacuation response. If you think about that, if you have some need, they've got to evacuate certain neighborhoods or whatever, how we bring the emergency services together for certain neighborhoods, if you need to set up a corridor and prohibit people from being in certain areas based on the disaster threat. It's a variety.
We do some of that on a daily basis when we have fires, and as he mentioned, when we have floods and we block a road and we tell people they can't go down the road. Those people can complain to you all who are going to talk to him, who are going to find out why we blocked the road.
And how long do those rules and regulations last?
As long as it's necessary for that exigent circumstance to be rectified, mitigated, or until it ends. Some things can go a long time depending on the severity of whatever happened during the time that it occurred.
That's kind of where I have some of my concerns. It's just there's not a lot of clarity on how long the authority is that we're granting and under what parameters that authority is being granted. So I just have some concerns with that.
And Darren, what I was talking about with A and B, so I just pulled it up, but instead of working from my notes, it talks about making issues and rules and regulations and getting it confirmed at the earliest practical time by the administrator. Then B says with the approval of the administrator or designee to obtain vital supplies. So the first one you can do and just get back to the administrator as soon as possible. The second one, it appears to me that you've got to get his approval before you do it.
The first one gives me the authority to come up with situations. If something happens at 2 o'clock in the morning, Mr. Marstall and you all may not be available for the exigent circumstance to protect life and property, life being the primary thing we're trying to do. I guess in that instance, you have to trust me to know what to do to protect that, and I do it. I make him aware of it, and he can tell you I have called him already and woke him up at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. If he answers the phone, I'm fine. If he doesn't, I may still have to make the decision and assume it can be a risky thing for me, but assume that he's going to be okay with my decision. But before I spend county money, I've got to have his approval. That's a lot of what number 2 is talking about, or B. Before I start to buy things, and if we have a hazardous material incident on the side of the road, we've got to bring people in who can handle that, meaning large wreckers, sometimes cranes. Those kinds of things, we don't have time to wait a long time, because if there's fuel flowing, if there's other things flowing, I've got to go ahead and do that. Now, we're going to hold that carrier responsible, but when I, as the emergency manager, make the call to whoever I make it to, whether it's somebody already contracted with in the county, sometimes we have those in place, or whether I have to find a new resource, they're expecting us to pay for that, whether that company does or not.
I understand that. I'm just saying B might be better worded like A, that says you can obtain the vital supplies, equipment, other properties found lacking and needed for the protection, but it must be confirmed at the earliest practical time by the administrator. See, to me, B says you've got to get his approval to get the supplies first. A says you can do it and get his approval at the earliest possible time.
A makes an assumption that I'm trying to protect people and I'm not spending money. B means I'm obligating us to pay for something if somebody else doesn't pay for it that
But
should be
you
paid.
can't do it unless you have the approval of the county administrator.
But other places in the document says if he's not available, there's other people that I try to get, and I have their numbers. Ultimately, it gets into where I'm trying to call you all.
Yeah, I'm just saying I would reword B to let you have it.
Mr. Chair, and I don't want to interrupt, but can we get a legal opinion here from the jailhouse lawyer? Can we get a
You got mine.
legal opinion? Because I think what Darren is saying is either or. He's got to be able to make decisions with or without the county administrator. And I think he works this every day, so I think he's better to understand what the policy says.
If he wants to get approval as county administrator before we buy supplies, that's what B says.
But it has worked so far, Darren, to our advantage, right? Because I think we looked at this during COVID, and we updated some policies when it came to this. So we've reviewed this a little bit already.
Well, we review it every 2 years, and we have questions pretty much every 2 years, especially when a new council member comes on council. I'm a little bit leery of anybody. The rules are never made for who sits in the seat in the world that I live in. They're made for somebody that might be brand new. I may be here tomorrow and I might not be here tomorrow. I understand that. That's the nature of my work. So I don't know if you want to give a director carte blanche without somebody there to hold them accountable or to give them something else. That's a decision council can make. If you want to give that much authority, I'm a little leery of, I would not ask for it.
And Mr. Chairman, Ms. DuPont can speak to some of this.
So to answer your question, and Mr. DeBose, you can correct me if you've seen otherwise, but in my prior jurisdictions, this continuity of government plan is very similar to what comes out of the state, as the director is saying. And this is the way it's written that way. It is convoluted, it is complex, and it is written, as he stated, for someone, you don't know who's in that seat to be able to take care of this. So the wording, as I understand it, is compliant with what comes out of the Emergency Management Department out of Columbia.
We have to submit these plans to them before we can submit them to you all. Now, this one was already approved. We didn't do that this time because we've had this same plan with this same wording in place, I think, since 2006 or 7.
But I would think B could be changed to where you could get to the administrator earliest possible time. But if you don't want that, that's fine.
Go ahead, Mr. Mosteller.
Council members, the years I've been up here and the years I've been in emergency services myself and stuff, Mr. Player is one of the best in the state at doing what we do. I trust what his decisions are for our citizens of Lancaster County. If we have a disaster, I'd rather have him in charge than anybody anywhere, because he knows, he's been there and done that, and he knows emergency services. And we need to appreciate people like him that knows this stuff and can come in and implement it if we do have a disaster.
I agree 100% with you, Councilman Mosteller. I'm just trying to help him out to not have to get to the administrator first on B. That's all I'm trying to do. If that's where.
Whatever works for him works for me. I mean,
You good with it?
And if I might, one more point, Councilman Luis, some of these things are written a little bit general because we don't know exactly what's coming down the pike. And they do that for a reason, to give us latitude with the understanding that if we go beyond the bounds of where we should be, The county administrator will hold me accountable, and you will hold him accountable.
And our legal counsel will also weigh in on that a little bit.
Councilmember Luis, I think you asked how long these rules and regulations would stay in place. And again, Mr. DeBose, if I'm speaking out of turn, an emergency declaration that's adopted by council lasts for 60 days. So on the 61st day, it's up unless you renew the declaration of emergency. So those rules and regulations, and Mr. Player, correct me if I'm wrong, they go away on that 61st day unless you renew them.
I think that was one of the things Ms. McGriff was talking about that this council did, or a council did with COVID. I think, and the state has been working on the governor's authorities, but I think the governor's emergency declarations have to be renewed every 30 days.
All right, any more questions or discussion? Thank you, Mr. Player. I think we're ready for a vote. All in favor of Resolution 1225-R 2023, raise your right hand. Opposed? Likewise, we have unanimous approval of our resolution. Let's move down to 8B, first reading of ordinance 2022-1831 regarding rezoning property located at 4263 Doby's Bridge Road in Indian Land from low-density residential, LDR, to institutional district, INS, to allow development of a daycare facility. Do I have a motion? Motion for Ms. McGriff for approval. Do I have a second to bring it to the floor? Second for Mr. Graham. Mr. Burhans.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of council, thank you. This is a rezoning item that represents a continuation from your November 14th meeting where the council at that time gave first reading consideration of a proposed rezoning of a site located at 4263 Doby's Bridge Road, immediately adjacent to the Indian Land Elementary School. At that time, you considered the facts that were presented to you and asked for a continuation until this meeting, so additional information could be presented to you. Our intent is to present that information at your request. I'll give some background information since we do have a new council member that had not heard that factual information, and the applicant will be here for questions. So the proposed rezoning, again, is located on Doby's Bridge Road. The proposal contemplates a rezoning from the low-density residential district to the institutional district. The underlying intent is to build a daycare facility and associated out parcel to be determined, the use to be determined in the future, with the applicant being Kings Mountain LLC. The subject property is outlined in red, again, on Doby's Bridge Road. Again, this is a kind of a bird's eye view of the subject property outlined in yellow. I did add a little red arrow, which will make more sense in a later slide, but that red arrow represents where the currently proposed driveway is to be located. The driveway location did shift as a result of this additional research undertaken by the applicant, but you can also see where the site, how it relates to Doby's Road and its curving alignment and the adjacent elementary school. The photo to the right is looking directly across the subject property at the home site across the street. And again, these site photos down Doby's Bridge, again, to the left looking west towards Fort Mill, to the right looking east towards 521, were taken roughly where the proposed driveway is currently reflected in the concept plan that I'm going to share.
What's the distance from 521 to this location?
I can tell you the distance from that location to the elementary school drive is around 550 feet. Beyond that, I might be another 1,500 or so, maybe 1,200. That's a guesstimate, but I was taking some measurements during the last item. That was one measurement I didn't take, so I apologize. But just to go back, you can kind of see where it resides there.
It's probably about a quarter mile.
Quarter of a mile.
Okay, so this is the product of the research you asked the applicant to undertake as part of first reading. This is a revised concept plan. The changes from the last version you saw reflect relocation of the driveway closer towards the eastern edge of the site. It's roughly now 25, 50 feet away from the property line. The site plan now reflects how internal traffic flow will be organized. It designates a drop-off area for pickup and drop-off of children, as well as where employee parking will be located. Landscaping has been shown. The outdoor play area has also been identified closer towards the front of the site, and it shows where the future out parcel will be located on the western side of the subject property. Just as a reminder, the Planning Commission had considered this previously and unanimously recommended approval of this rezoning. They found it consistent with the comprehensive plan, and this was also consistent with staff's recommendation for approval as well. And again, the applicant is here. They have, I believe, their traffic engineer as well as their land planner and other officials. So if you have any questions for them, they'd be more than happy to further discuss this item, as well as myself.
Go ahead, Mr. Mosteller.
Rocks, I got some discussion here I'd like. I do like the way they move the traffic, the drop off to the rear of the building, and that will allow more vehicle storage coming off the highway there. I do like that, the redraw of that. That looks real good. But have you seen a trip generation report? Has that been done as far as the 50 peak hour trips and stuff? Is that?
I'll ask the traffic engineer to respond to that, but it's my understanding, I don't believe a traffic study is going to be needed for the daycare, but when the second user comes in, a traffic study might be needed for both sites combined.
Okay.
I'll ask.
I just thought that had to be issued, and that's what triggered a TIA, you know.
You are correct. 50 peak hour trips does trigger the TIA.
Okay.
I don't believe the daycare facility on its own will do so, but the daycare plus the out parcel, whenever that use is defined, would likely trigger the TIA. Again, the TIA would come about with the submittal of civil construction plans.
I got you.
Not at the rezoning stage.
All right. I noticed the notes that I looked in when I was looking over my notes in here stated that the applicant coordinated with DOT about the site access, which is the driveway stuff and all. But there was no DOT comments about the existing traffic and added traffic that'll be for the daycare. That's what concerns me.
So as I understand it, an official with the DOT, as well as Stephen Blackwelder in our Engineering and Environmental Services Office, met to discuss the updated concept plan and to review it. I believe maybe the applicant may have also been a representative at that meeting. And so based on just, again, this preliminary information, the DOT, as I understand it, is comfortable understanding that the additional information is going to need to be submitted with the civil construction plans, demonstrating explicitly how site distance is going to be achieved. Again, I believe the traffic engineer is here and can certainly maybe further articulate those conversations.
Okay.
But that is my understanding of what transpired up to this point.
Also, when I read his evaluation report, that he sat there at 7:30 a.m. peak hours of the school and didn't have any issues exiting the property. But no PM stats were noted, afternoon stuff. There was nothing noted about that. And what really concerns me is 150 to 200 cars, if they have a couple hundred kids, entering and exiting this property at 5 to 6 o'clock in the afternoons. Doing this with the normal Indian Land backup traffic at that time of day. It's the worst time of the day in Indian Land. Anybody in here knows that. I don't think I don't see enough there that's going to tell me that this is not going to be really a traffic problem. I'll be honest with you, I visualize this as another Highway 160 in the making. Adobe Bridge Road. It's going to happen because so much traffic is to and from Fort Mill, both directions there. If something ain't done now to get this under control, get it done right, or if it's a TIA, we're making them do the roads right and stuff like that, that we're going to end up with another 160. And to my understanding, that's what I think what we're planning on doing is foresight of looking ahead at what this is going to do down the road. So that's some of my concerns. And I just wondered if we need a TIA. If nothing, I mean, that's up to you, the planning director, but to me, I just need to know what the traffic from the daycare is going to cause. Nothing in this evaluation report told me anything about the traffic.
Mr. Sponsor, I mean, you're raising some good questions. So how about we ask that the consulting traffic engineer that was hired by the applicant, maybe he's listened to Michael Wickline, he's listened to your questions, give him an opportunity to address those and see how his feel after that.
Before you do that, Billy, are you concerned about the stacking of cars going in there?
Yeah, but if you're going east, coming out of Fort Mill, going east toward 521, if you want to make a left into that daycare, okay, and there's a lot of ongoing traffic coming to you, and you can't make a left turn, what's that going to do with all that traffic behind you? Same thing it always did on 160 before they four-laned it or three-laned it or whatever. There needs to be maybe some type of a turning lane in the middle of the road, something that the traffic could get off the road to make their turns and not back traffic up and keep the traffic flowing. That's my concerns is that, because you get all these cars in and out of here, you know what it's going to do. It's going to be a small elementary school is what it's going to basically be.
Especially with the growth plans they had last time they presented this to us.
And I'm for it. I mean, I'm not against it, but I just want it to be done right. And Lancaster County does the right thing of getting our roads right as we go and let these developers and people help make it right instead of creating us a problem. Let's fix the problem as we go.
I will just add, my lifeline, Mr. Bodner, reported that the distance to 521 is 0.34 miles. So, thank you. And this is Michael Wickline, who is a consulting traffic engineer, and I'll ask him to address some of these questions.
So, Michael Wickline with Design Resource Group at 2459 Wilkinson Boulevard in Charlotte. Just to address a few of your concerns that I heard. So the main reason why I wanted to go out and observe traffic was for two reasons. One, I wanted to see what the site distance was like, so that was most important. Two, I did want to see the effect of the school it has during the typical morning peak. The reason why I didn't do a typical school peak at that point in the afternoon is because a daycare generally falls outside the typical school peak that you would see at like 3:30. 2:30, 3:30 in that ballpark, because daycare is aimed towards working folk who are going, 5 o'clock, 4:30, somewhere between that 4 to 6 range. So when I went out there and looked in the morning, and I'll note that I've done a lot of school observations. My firm is the on-call traffic engineer for Charlotte-Mecklenburg School System, so been through a lot of those. Went out 30 minutes prior to the bell schedule to see kind of how that was transpiring. Noticed that, basically, they have a really good circulation pattern from what I could tell, with entering via Ridge Road towards 521, circulating, and then exiting. Never saw any queuing or backup at that point. To answer some of your other concerns related to the turn lane and potential of traffic backing, we did take a count. We had some information that I saw. We did a tube count out on December 15th, which basically just counts the volume each direction. It didn't appear to be necessarily over the top, and from my personal experience. From a trip generation standpoint, this site is by code going to require a TIA. That again goes during the CD process. Even if it didn't, SCDOT has to issue a driveway permit. And so regardless if a TIA is done or not, SCDOT makes that final decision. It's their road as to whether a turn lane is warranted and therefore required as a part of that process. But to answer your question, yes, I mean, we're going to have to go through the TIA process for this site. It'll have to go through the typical county process. SCDOT will review that. And then in conjunction with all that coordination, a determination will be made. Are there turn lanes necessary? Are there off-site improvements necessary? Basically to ensure that safe and reasonable access is provided. I think at this stage, and what we've done, and the plan's not up, but what we've done is try to maximize the site distance, number one. We've also tried to maximize the internal circulation pattern to provide the best we can, as well as an extremely long internal protected stem. So that's basically from when you exit from Dobie's Bridge, there are no turns directly into a parking lot for 250 feet. And so what that allows is, even if the traffic, let's say there are issues and concerns where you can't pull out or in, you're not going to see and experience potential backups onto Dobie's Bridge due to this site, because what's going to happen is it's going to circulate internally. It gives plenty of space for these vehicles to exit left and right. So again, a very preliminary evaluation is what we've completed here, and all of the major details and final recommendations were worked out through the TIA process.
Is and whether the SCDOT is going to allow you to put your access point where it's going to be.
So again, there has
Because you've got a concept plan, and if you've heard me before talk about concept plans, I'm not too enthused about concept plans. But for me to vote on this, I need to know what the TIA is going to tell them.
And I agree with Terry. At what point will the South Carolina Department of Transportation determine whether a turn lane need to be there?
That's a part of before they issue a driveway permit for the site. So basically, your cover here is you're allowing for an entitlement to happen. And if we go through this process and they can't find an access that works on site, DOT is not going to give them the permit for it. DOT is not going to issue a driveway permit that they feel doesn't meet their requirements. And they're going to have to go through that process, just like the county isn't going to allow COs until you get through or even CD approval, until you get to the point that any required improvements by ordinance, which would be through the UDO or SCDOT requirements, to be in place prior to them receiving their certificate of occupancy for the site generally.
So let me ask a question here for clarity. Will we complete our 3 readings before we find out whether we need a turning lane, or will that be done during the process?
If you're asking staff that question, then you will not, the rezoning will be completed positively or negatively before any traffic studies are completed or civil construction plans are developed, when those kinds of answers are normally provided by virtue of the county's process and DOT's process.
So if a turning lane is not suggested by DOT, and we've completed the 3 readings, project moves on, right?
That would be correct. They would just meet whatever requirements are specified by the DOT.
Okay.
DOT controls access to the state roads.
They ultimately control the state access. They, again, with the daycare combined with the future out parcel, highly likely, as Mr. Wickline's already indicated, a TIA is going to be required when the civil construction plans are prepared. That's when we would normally receive that, be reviewed by the county, be reviewed by DOT. Parallel to that, they would be developing their final driveway location. They'd have all the survey data necessary to make sure site distances are complied with. And again, it would be determined any road improvements on Dobie's Bridge would be identified with that traffic study at that time and incorporated into the civil construction plans.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
there would probably be minimal disruption in the morning hours, because the majority of the traffic that goes to the elementary school goes up to River Road, comes around behind the other schools, and then they dump out at the back of the school. And then the cars go back out onto Dobie Bridge Road at that point in time. And most of those at that point in time will be most likely turning right, going back to 521. Now, in the evening time, there may be backups there, as Mr. Mosteller was saying, because you got traffic coming in from Fort Mill, and it just depends. Most of the time, that traffic flows smooth. I mean, I go that way every day from work and back. And, but, you know, if there's been an accident or something like that, it's obviously going to back up, and there's going to be an issue with, you know, backed up traffic at that point in time. But it normally does not get back that far if it's backing up for one to get onto Highway 521.
I would, and Mr. Carnes is correct, and again, as I was looking at the schools off plan, again, they use River Road to access kids for dropping off or picking up. That drive that I mentioned is 500 and whatever, 50 feet away on Dobie's Bridge is an exit drive only, as used by the district for pickup and drop-off activity. I would just highlight one thing that Mr. Wickline had already indicated, but I do just want to put an image to your faces. They did a really good job in planning for the site and coming up with an elongated entry and exit road. Again, you've got a lot of free flow when you get off of Dobie's Bridge to come into the site. So that way, if it's busy on site or whatever is going on, there's not going to be a backup created or unlikely to be a backup created onto Dobie's Bridge. I mean, because again, they've got this tremendous amount of stacking set up by that elongated entry road. So give that some consideration. But again, I think the applicant, going back to the November meeting, again, what council had asked the applicant to do was to really dive into the site plan more thoroughly in terms of fleshing out how pickup and drop off would work, where the site driveway should be, and other features like parking and whatnot. And so that's what the applicants come back with. I think if the council would be more comfortable having the TIA completed before giving a final reading to any rezoning, I think that might be helpful just to know, because the applicant has stated previously that they are committed to the site. I think they may already own the site as well. I may be mistaken, but I believe that's the case. And I think they're invested in bringing a successful project here and want to make you happy, but also see fulfillment of their project. So it might be some helpful feedback.
Mr. Chair, I don't have a problem with them building there. They bought the land. I'm not against them building there. I just want it done right as far as the traffic handle. That's all I'm interested in. I welcome to Lancaster County, good business. There's nothing wrong with that. And we need daycares in Lancaster County. But I just don't want to create a problem. I want us to have our traffic as we go fixed, and we don't run into problems. If we do this, and then just consultant, Michael, whatever it was talking about, I don't know, you're not from Lancaster County, so you hadn't been on Indian Land traffic at 5 or 6 o'clock. Anywhere in Indian Land is backed up at that time of day. 521 Dobie Bridge Road, all of them. So it really is an issue. And what concerns me is that time where that traffic is just backed up is when these kids is going to be picked up. That's the pickup times for parents getting off work coming to get these kids is from 5 to 6 o'clock generally. I know my mom running daycare for years. I know what time and stuff like that. So that's just my concerns, that we don't run into problems saying, we got a mess here.
No, I can appreciate that, and it's good to hear the concern I'm hearing from all council members. And so one thought might be is, again, we have 3 readings for this. If council is comfortable with the overall concept of the project, but just would feel more comfortable with having the reassurance that a traffic study had been completed, perhaps we get through first reading, and then with the applicant given the instruction that a traffic study would make the council and the community much more comfortable with this project. Let's assess how long that's going to take during this gap between first and second reading. They've already secured a traffic engineer, which is great. That would just help us kind of keep moving, but in recognition of what council is stating, that they would feel more comfortable.
That would make me feel more comfortable. I don't know about the rest of them, but me personally, yes.
I already stated that. But I also want to know, there's a future build area here. Are they going to use the same access point, I assume? And what is that future build going to be?
I think that's still undetermined, but what I heard the applicant state was medical office, maybe a dentist, something complementary. It's in the institutional zoning district, so you have some firm bookends on what could ultimately be put on that property.
I thought it was going to be used for additional child care possibly from that last meeting we had. Is that not correct? What is the capacity for this daycare facility? Well, my biggest concern last time was just the amount of driveway you had to queue up cars to the pickup area. And I do think is adequate now. I went to a daycare in Greenville, South Carolina, and watched to see how they were queuing up cars because I just happened to be in the area and had to just luck into it. So I think you do have adequate driveway space there. So I thank you for that, and that was my concern last time.
Rox, my only concern is, I know we promote connectivity between parcels and all, but with this being a daycare, there does not need to be access from the property next to it going through the parking lot. Is that's not there to the left, the little stub out? Would that be connected to the property next to it, where that traffic would be going through that parking lot? This is.
I know what you're asking.
Put the drawing back up.
Yes, sir.
My concern is that this future build area, that the traffic is gonna go through here, which is, to me, a no-no.
So, yeah, I understand.
I don't think you need any traffic going through the parking lot where kids are gonna be.
Yes, so I think.
Is that a valid point, or?
So yes, so I understand the point you're making. The site is being set up for shared access, and so that little stub out is going to this vacant part or future vacant out parcel, if you will. That could be dentist, medical office, whatever it could be under institutional zoning. And so the intent is to consolidate drives, along a.
I've got a real concern with that access point right there, with the traffic going through, with parents and kids going through at that point on that parking lot. I would be more comfortable if it would come in from the backside. I'm not gonna tell anybody how to design the property, but I don't know if I can support it if a kid got run over in that parking lot and I knew I had opportunity to vote it down. But do you see, is that a valid point?
No, I think
where the traffic from the next parcel right there needs to enter behind that parking lot?
I think from a site planning standpoint, no, I think the interconnectivity from the property should be on the southern side of the parking bay, not on the northern side where it's currently proposed. For the reasons you explained, but it
He's the professional. Y'all are. I just have concerns.
And completely understand your concerns. And so, we're kind of tasked in a hard spot. We don't know if this other piece is going to develop, if it will, what the case is. So we're looking at the piece that we know is happening. We're trying to develop the best parking and circulation plan that we possibly can. Now, we have a couple of things going against us. State-maintained road. We have to meet spacing requirements for access, so we have to make sure if we can fit in access. Clearly have site distance concerns, right? So it's not unthinkable to think that there could be the potential for a right-in or an entrance-only drive at that location, because you wouldn't need the site distance that's necessary for an exit move, which then could have you circulate your traffic for that parcel potentially through and in, and then with the circulation of that site and how we have it basically shown as a one-way to circle back out, it would be a right turn into the parking lot through staff parking, which wouldn't interfere with that pickup. No one's going to be walking their children past that side of the parking lot, which would then help it. So there are things we can look at and do. We're just too far ahead of that at this point.
I got one more question. Going back to what Mr. Blackman, Councilman Blackman was talking about a while ago, the number of kids. I think our last time we talked about this, the potential build-out was 150 to 200. I got those numbers. I got them in my notes. Has that changed now? That's what we were told. Okay. Okay, so you was at 20,000 then. Okay, and is that what you're saying? So you're not going to be expanding this building later? No. Okay, so that's going to be the max on that then, okay.
You have, I think state law dictates how many square feet you have to have per child.
I understand that, but if he can add a 10,000-foot addition later, then you ain't got adequate access or whatever. then.
That's where the concept plan, I get in trouble with, because they might not do a 10,000, they might do it 20,000 once it gets rezoned.
Yeah, that's
That's
where,
my,
where our planning director is gonna come in.
Again, this is,
Or is this-
this is great discussion. I will just take my opportunities when I can. This is a great example of when plan-based rezoning systems work really well versus by right rezonings where you have non-binding concept plans. Just keep that in mind as we talk about the UDO and the type of zoning system we want in place in Lancaster County to achieve the best results.
It place commercial.
So can I ask a question? So, and this is to the attorneys, can we approve this use as an exception to the current zoning?
So you're asking if you can take the current zoning designation and allow this use as an exception? No.
can we rezone it and say for a 10,000 square foot building? Can we write that in the ordinance?
No, this is, again, this is, goes back to the bigger picture conversations we had unrelated to this application about the benefits of a plan-based zoning system or the ability to have that system and how there are benefits to the council and the community with that. This is a by right rezoning, so if and when it's rezoned to the institutional district, the applicant will have all legal rights to develop on that property in accordance with county regulations.
And that would include, they can build a hotel, a motel, movie theater. Those are all permitted by
It can
INS.
permit all uses in the institutional district.
Okay. How many employees are you going to have?
All of that is going to be determined by state law as far as the number of employees required per child, and it's also going to be determined, by the ultimate provider who's going to run the facility, and that's not known at this point in time. I also would just like to address, as far as institutional uses, this is very limited. So there are some medical offices that are allowed, healthcare facilities, government buildings, schools. It's extremely narrow, the types of uses for this property.
Yep, it allows for hotels and motels and also for movie theaters.
For institutional use?
Correct.
I don't believe that's entirely correct. I did look at that.
I'm looking at it right now.
One follow-up on Mr. Lee's questions, though. If there's 100 kids there, and you were talking about DHEC having the rule, whoever DSS having the rules on how many workers there would be, how many workers would there be with 100 kids?
You're going to have approximately about 10 because we run a facility at our church, and we have 87 children there, and that's how many, we have 8 employees.
1 per 10?
So the number of employees is really beyond the scope of this discussion. It's also beyond the scope of what my client needs to know for this, because they are not going to be running the daycare. That's going to be determined by state law, and the provider who will be running the daycare will be responsible for being certified and compliant in that.
Nobody here knows what the law
We don't know, and we also are not, that's not an issue that council's asked us to look at for this meeting.
It might be.
Are there any amendments that anyone would like to make to the?
Well, I guess, I didn't like that last answer, but, we're just trying to see that this conceptual plan makes sense in a safety situation. As we know, we've had parking problems with our own institutional zonings within the county. So if there's, I now am thinking, we're going to just approve the rezoning. Then they can do whatever they want. That driveway does not have to sit there like it is. The number of parking spaces does not have to.
The state will determine, have the final say-so on the driveway.
They don't on the parking. And
We have our parking regulations.
what does it say for,
Uh,
what is it?
Yeah,
I'm not sure I like our parking regulations either, which we'll be making amendments.
well, we have to base a decision, but.
No, our decision really is just to rezone it or not, and that's the
No,
whole.
I think I could offer an amendment saying we're going to rezone it pending the results of the TIA
Before,
before third reading.
So what happens if they don't get?
just with the lawyer, to make sure that that amendment,
I don't even know that you'd necessarily need to make an amendment to make the rezoning subject to any TIA again. I don't know that that's even in the four corners of directly what you're doing, which is rezoning and weighing on whether that district is appropriate for the area and the surrounding properties. Now, if a TIA isn't produced, I mean, if it's subject to, and that is a deciding factor for y'all, you can always vote it down third reading. I mean, that's kind of your subject to ultimate option there.
If this doesn't pass and they can't get the road access permit, then to Alan's point, they can build anything that's in the institutional.
Yeah, if a rezoning is passed to any zoning use designation, any of the allowed by right uses are in there. There might be conditional uses in there, special exception uses. But yes, in theory, well, in practice, if you rezone a property to a use designation, any of those uses that are allowed by right can be put in there. Again, subject to site restrictions and other permitting authorities, but yeah.
institutional has very limited uses.
To respond to your request about the child ratio, 1 to 2 years is 1 teacher per 6 children. 2 to 3 years is 1 teacher per 8 children. 3 to 4 is 1 child, 1 teacher per 12 children, and 4 to 5 is 1 teacher for every 17. So it just depends on what the mix is going to be.
Boone, North Carolina, for a client. It requires 98 parking spots. There's no way to do 98 parking spots in a hotel on this site. So I get that there's an issue of, well, they could do this or that. And I wish there was a rezoning code you have where we could just do this to daycare, because that's all we're trying to do. But the site doesn't sit for a hotel or even a movie theater. I mean, there's not enough parking for that. So, I mean, what you're looking at is 28 parking spots right now, 28, 30, whatever it is. So it kind of gives you a visual of where this parking, what this site can handle.
And sir, to just to say, this council, I think, is a very honorable group here. And so when you're asking for a daycare to go on this site, and we see the conceptual plan, when we vote on it, just like Mr. Harper said, we just want to know that it's got a pretty good sound basis right now. And traffic up there in Indian is always a big, big concern. And I appreciate you answering the number of employees bases you're planning versus your attorney not wanting to answer that question. Because that just gives us a warm and fuzzy that, you know, hey, y'all thought about this stuff, and you're going to adequately have this thing developed. Hopefully, it's going to work for you, and you won't have to have it sitting vacant, because obviously, like you said, a hotel can't go in there. So then we would be stuck with wonder what is going to go there.
All right, at some point,
Thank you. I appreciate your honest answer.
we can talk this thing together and read between the lines, but at some point, we need to vote on this. There's concerns about traffic, and as it has been brought up, there's some council members really want a traffic impact study completed, and like was, if that is not completed by the third reading, you can always vote it down. But I think there's a great need for this. I know I've got grandchildren now, and both my boys struggled or have struggled with trying to take care of that. And I believe it's farther enough off 521 where your traffic's not going to back up or stack onto 521. So I would like to see us, I would support first reading of this. And I think that if there is concern about the traffic and that's not completed by third reading, this might, I might change my mind.
Mr. Chairman, did we get clarification? I think a TIA may take longer than our 3 reading schedule.
We can delay whenever
Okay.
they won't.
I'm just making sure, if you think we're on the 3
No, we
reading
won't.
path, the TIA I don't think will be done by then.
As chair, or we will delay whatever it takes without.
Calling for the vote.
So let's go and call for the vote. All right, we got a motion for approval of first reading of ordinance 2022-1831. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed? All right, we passed first reading by a vote of 5 for and 2 opposed. Let's move down to public hearing and first reading of ordinance 2023-1837 regarding rezoning property from low-density residential, LDR, to professional business in order to build a medical office. And the applicant is Nathan Terry. Do I have a motion? Well, we got a public hearing on first reading. So, Mr. Burhans.
Mr. Chairman, members of council, thank you again. So as has been read in the record, this is a proposed rezoning of a subject property just under a half acre in size, located at the intersection of Charles Pettis Road and 521. The current zoning is low-density residential. The proposed zoning is professional business. And again, as you've referenced, the intent is to build a modest medical office building. The applicant is Mr. Nathan Terry. Just to get everyone familiar with the site, again, the subject property is outlined in yellow there with obviously fronting 521. This is referred to as a double frontage lot. It fronts 521, but it also fronts Charles Pettis, which is located just immediately south of Van Wyck Road. Just to help give you some images of the street side, this photo is looking southward on 521. You have 521 on the left, Charles Pettis to the right, and you can notice there's a pretty good grade separation as the site's kind of flowing back westward to Charles Pettis. Okay. The next image before you is the subject property's concept plan that has been developed. Again, it is a conceptual rendering only, as we covered kind of on many cases, including the most recent one. Is a reflection of how the applicant intends to develop the property. There will need to be some changes for cross-access and other things, but this is a general representation of that property and how it intends to be developed. The applicant does intend to take access off of Charles Pettis versus 521. I think that's based on feedback from SCDOT, but also just in reflection of that grade separation I showed you in the site photo, that taking access off 521 would probably be kind of just be challenging just from a construction standpoint. This subject property is also located in the Southern Panhandle Small Area Plan, which designated as future commercials. We did find that this proposal would be consistent with that designation. The item was heard back in November, and the Planning Commission did recommend unanimously to recommend approval of the rezoning. The only key topic discussed at that time was generally this requirement for frontage sidewalks along 521. And staff also recommended approval of this case, as it was found to be also consistent with the comprehensive plan. I'll certainly make myself available for any questions. The applicant, Mr. Terry, is also in the audience and can help with any questions that you have.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Burhans? All right, thank you. We do have a public hearing. No one signed up for the public hearing on this, so I'm looking for a motion to bring this matter.
Move to approve.
Motion from Mr. Mosteller for approval. Do I have a second?
Second.
Who seconded that? Mr. Graham. Discussion.
I'll start it off. This professional business zoning is perfect for that new stretch of 521. The new development's going to start going on out. This would be perfect, and I'm excited about it. You know, it meets the small area plan. It's good to get a plan that works. This here is really good, so.
Anyone else?
I think the access on Charles Pettis is a great idea, and I wish more the businesses along that stretch of 521 would use Charles Pettis. We talk about collector roads, and in my opinion, Charles Pettis is the perfect collector road.
Just to help give you a shameful plug for us, the study we're working on, we are working with a regional engineering company that's doing an access management study along this section of 521. And so they are, Mr. Graham, to your point, going to look at Charles Pettis and see how best it can be utilized for access, if at all, for the other parcels on this frontage. So just want to update, and we'll come back to council. Something to propose.
All right. Any more? Any more discussion? Hearing none, we're ready to vote on first reading of ordinance 2023-1837. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, likewise. We have unanimous approval of first reading of ordinance 2023-1837. Is there any reason this should not go on the consent next time? No one has any issues? Okay, we'll plan on the consent. All right, let's move down to item 9, our discussion and action items. We have an approval for appointment to the Health and Wellness Commission of Mrs. Catherine Abbott for District 5. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Motion for Mr. Graham, second for Ms. McGriff. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. Anything else, Mr. Burhans, before we go into executive session? All right, let's move. Go ahead. Let's move down to number 12, executive session. Do I have a motion to go into executive session to discuss 4 items? Second. I have a motion from Mr. Carnes, second from Ms. McGriff. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval. We are now in executive session.
Oh, no. All I can say is good luck with that.
was unanimous.
Hey, Charlene.
Is that yours? Okay.
No, he doesn't.
She gonna have,
John will stay
Tom's
this
gonna do
time,
it.
yeah.
I did not, Rox and I were talking zoning. We didn't even.
Ready? I'd like to call this meeting, Lancaster County Council, back to order. Could I have a motion to come out of executive session?
So moved.
Have a motion for Mr. Carr, second for Ms. McGriff.
For the record, in executive session, one legal briefing was received concerning a contractual matter. A legal briefing was received concerning development regulations and policies. And then two other briefings were received concerning potential contractual acquisitions of real property. No decisions were made, no votes were taken.
All right, we gotta have, we didn't vote to come out of executive session. I need to have that vote to come out of executive session. All in favor, raise your right hand. We do have unanimous approval to come out of executive session. I apologize for that. It's 9:07 PM. Could I please have a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Thank you, Mr. Louise.
Little Larry.
Thank you. Now I'm looking for a second.
Second.
I have a second for Mr. Boston. All in favor, raise your right hand. We have unanimous approval to adjourn. This meeting is adjourned.